All right, so I'm going to move on to navigation. This is where it starts getting more and more complex. Navigation. What do I mean by navigation? It's a term we use in apps. It's just navigation is the way screens or patches are organized in an app. It's like what screen should show now and when should the screen be shown. And there's different types. So you can see it as like I'm in screen 1 and then I press a button, I go into screen 2 and I can come back. That's linear. I can go in and out. And then I have pop-ups, things that pop up on top, which are out of context. So that's what we mean by app navigation. And what I said before is this thing here is a navigation builder. So I'll show what you can do in order to build navigation flows. And I'll build a few example flows just to show what I mean. All right. Next, we have what we call menus. So I chose this photo on the side here as an example. This is, I think, Instagram or one of the older versions of Instagram. But this is a type of menu. It organizes a set of screens into tabs at the bottom. This is what we call a bottom tab menu. You have drawer menu, you have sub menu, you have context menu. I will show these on the patchwork and in the app as an example when we start building. Yeah, so app navigation, menu types, you see where I'm going. I will make something just to showcase the most basic navigation you can do in Appspotr. So what I'm going to do is, again, look at my patchwork, create a view, and this time I will make something interactive on the view. I'll make a button so that we can click and go somewhere, right? And then I'll show, again, connecting two screens together. Also just mention in the chat if I'm going too fast. Sometimes get overexcited about what I'm building and go too fast. So what should we call this? I don't know. My button screen. The more apps you build, you figure out maybe a way to name things so you don't get confused. Some apps can have 30 screens, 40 screens. So I'm doing what I'm saying. I created a view. I'll just add a button. Let's go into the properties of the button and give it a nicer name, like Navigate. It's pretty straightforward. I would like the text to be centered. Just feels nice. Maybe the text color should have a little color in it. And why not some boldness? There. This is just a button. It doesn't do anything. What I need to do now, in order to make it do something, I need to create what we call an event. The reason to do it this way is because you can have, when an app gets really complex, you can have multiple events doing different things at different moments in time. And it makes sense to have a pragmatic way to create them rather than to have like an automatic way for things to just happen. So this is another concept that I'm going to introduce. I was talking before about inputs and outputs. So there are things that can be sent into a screen, and there are things that can be sent out of it. One of these is events. So we have this thing called output here. I'm on the second tab, which is called view properties. I just scroll down a bit. I create an output. Again, the name doesn't really matter, but I like to name my events with the prefix on, just because that's a pattern I've been using when I've been building apps. So on, and you'll see it's used everywhere. On Navigate sounds kind of nice. And then there's a bunch of different things. We'll get into these other types later, but I want event. Add. See, now it's here. You can rename it, you can remove it, whatever you want, but it's here. And now there's one more step you need to do. I've created an event. I've added a button. I need to say that this button uses this event. The reason for this is you could have multiple buttons, multiple events, and it's your decision which one goes to which. So now I'm going to go into the other tab where I have my component properties for the button. And there are a bunch of different things that you can configure events to. There are lots of events that could occur on a screen. But the most basic one that I want is on press. When I press this thing, what should happen? You have a bunch of different options, but you have the one I created on Navigate. This is the critical step. Adding that button, creating that event, and combining them together. That's how we'll start to create navigation. All right. It's super basic, but we'll start with this because we could go way more complex if we wanted to. All right, so I have a screen with a button that's connected to my Navigate event. I'll go back to my patchwork. And let's do this. Let's add my, see now I have two possibilities to create patches from. And we will go through what's below here. We'll start just by looking up here. I'll add in here. Ta-da. All right. So now I'm gonna do something and I will explain this. This is a menu, so it can have multiple things connected to it. Other patches can't. So I'm gonna give it another possibility and say, hey, you can have this or this. So notice that this guy, my button screen, has a second output here. This is the one we're gonna use to do some navigation. All right, so this is what's gonna happen when I press the button. We're gonna go here. We will look at this one later, but it does what it says. When the screen loads, then run here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put another one. Let's just give it a name. So we show navigation 1. So again, I clicked here, gave it a name. I added the same patch again, just because there's nothing specific I want to do here. What I'm going to do is the same thing I was doing with the menu. I'm going to connect this guy into this guy. All right. You notice that there's a connection there and it stays together. And I'm going to call him navigation 2. You'll see why there. So now I have navigation 1, navigation 2. What is that going to do to my app? And there we go. It reloads. And now we have a new icon up here, which is essentially a drawer menu. That's because the default menu is a drawer menu. And I'll show you the different types of menus later. But now you see I have home 1 and navigation 1, the two connections here. All right. And by clicking on this one, now I come to this screen with my button. Right. And when I click it, it goes to, it followed this and it went here. And now this all of a sudden has a back button. There you go. Yeah, add patch, connect. So I've also listed the steps on the slide so it can be followed later. And there we go. And as you've maybe guessed, it's infinite. There's no reason to restrict it. You can do as many as you want. But obviously you might have different screens with different content. I'm just illustrating here. But maybe you're going to build some sort of complicated menu system with different options and different sub-menus. That's up to you. 4, there we go. Let's do that again. All right. There, see. All right. And then one small extra thing that I haven't written on the slide necessarily, but if you want to change the order of these, again, it's a property. Because there's, yeah. All right, we have an interesting question. I'll get to that. We can reorder, and then this will become reordered. Again, it's on the menu itself. And now if I refresh, the top one will be the first one that shows up. You see, and then the other one becomes the secondary. So that's up to you how you build your app and your app structure. But this is that, and now I'm just going to showcase some different menu styles, and then I'll get back to the questions. So main menu, yes. I mentioned that the default is a drawer, but you could very well switch it to be a bottom tab. It's the same pattern. You click on the thing you want to edit the properties of, and the properties are in this sidebar here. And there are a lot of properties, and you get to, at some point, a thing called navigation layout, configure the navigator. It says drawer, you switch it to bottom tab. And then, yeah, we can show more labels. If we wanted to, they might have the same icons though. Yeah, let me enable labels. Might be a bit nice. As you can't tell which is which. Yeah, that's a bit clearer. It's not necessarily the most pretty styling, but you can see the icon that's selected here will be there. And the styling can be done in the style section. I'm not going to cover that today, but it's the design of these tabs are completely customizable. So is the top bar as well. So don't worry about that. But now it looks a bit different. And now you're going to maybe notice what I mean by navigation. I can click and go into 3, but I can still go to home 1, and I come back and I'm still here. There's a history to it. So you can imagine your users doing different things in the app, and they go into a different section, and they get distracted with something else, but they can come back and continue. All right, that's bottom tab. Next, I mentioned things being out of context. So in the app world, it just means that you can be in the middle of something, like down into navigation 3, but you can pop up and do something else. So let me just showcase that really quickly. All right, I'll add another one. And just for fun, I'll add 2 again. There, you can see that once you start doing it often, you start having these reflexes of already putting things in a certain way before dragging. So now you saw I dragged from menu item. I'm going to drag from this thing below called context item. So this menu has a bunch of possibilities built into it. That's why it's like this. And again, boom. And let me do this again. There. Now let's refresh our app. And now you'll see a new icon on the menu. This one. Again, this button can be customized. You can look however you want. You can remove the background color and only have an icon. If you want, you can even change the icon. And when I click, you see that it shows this guy. Boom, boom. So what could happen is I could be in the middle of 3 and then get distracted by some action here. Go 1 level deeper in here, and I come back and I'm still here. I could even go into this place, come back, and 3 is still on 3. That's context, and then submenu. I think this might answer partially James's question. We have another type of menu, which is a submenu, which can allow you to make 2 tabs on the top instead of the bottom. So again, I'm going to add something, and you can see you can add more navigation patches, main menu, submenu. So yes, you can combine multiple menus. And there you go. I'm just going to show a submenu. Actually connected straight to the menu. Why not? I have seen really complicated Frankenstein monster patchworks. So yeah, you can be creative. It's possible. There we go. I will do something similar. Organize them in a nice little grid before I connect them. That's just my way of doing it. But if you prefer and have another way of doing it, that should also work. You see, this guy doesn't have context. He only has menu. Up. And I'm going to just, for the sake of it, say sub 1, sub 1A, sub 2, sub 2A. Yeah, this guy's called submenu. Why not? Let's refresh our app. So in the course of, 10 minutes, now all of a sudden our flowchart and app structure has become much more complex. And now we even have a third option. So this can get a bit confusing sometimes. the tabs are in this order, but here they're in this, it's actually because of the ordering here. You can see you can do the same thing for the context. So if I wanted it to be at the top, I would move it. I'm going to leave it as it is. So what happens when I click on submenu? There you go. I have 2 tabs. And inside you can navigate. There you go. That gets to the submenu part. But it's not only 2. You see 2 tabs. I could add a 3rd one if I wanted to. And at some point it gets too small. So you don't want to add too many, but that's up to you to make it however you want. Yeah, that's how the different types of navigation you can do. And yes, if I'm going to combine now James' question, you can do this. Let's hide this guy here somewhere. Why not? There we go. I'm just going to add another button screen here as another option. So hidden menu. We allow you to build these types of things, but sometimes when you release apps to the App Store, you also have to realize that you have to do things a certain way for Apple. So please still make sure to check the guidelines on how you should do things, because it's not necessarily because it's possible on Appspotr that it's something that should be done. But yeah, you could essentially have 2 separate sections to your app with a different menu altogether. You'll see this will create an issue in my app, because now I'll have a section where the user is stuck. And I can show you how to get unstuck, but in another session. So now going here, when I click this navigate button, I'm completely in a different menu, if that makes sense. Yeah, it can get pretty complex if you want. All right, that was the 2-part of navigation. So you can nest screens within each other. Depending on the navigator you use, whether it's a drawer or bottom bar, bottom tab bar, you can have different tabs. You can have tabs on the side, and the app will remember the history. And when you look at it on iOS, I don't necessarily have the preview now, but you can. It's native, so you can do the proper sliding from left to right as well. All right. Are there any other questions? I hope this answered your question, James. You can nest multiple navigators within each other.